Hi there, I'm super excited to be here today with Justin Furness. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, thank you, Sabine. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here.
Likewise for us. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with our audience your experience with sugar and the impact on our health. So before you get started, I will share a little more about Justin. Justin is Europe's #1 accelerator of potential. He's also the founder of LifeBrain System. And Justin has over a decade of experience in integrative medicine and consciousness-based healthcare. He has really helped everybody from professional athletes to families. And he has had over thousands of clients worldwide to really help them realize and achieve what they most desire from life. Well, that sounds really, really great, and we're therefore so excited to have you here. Before we get started with the questions, is there anything you would like to add about yourself?
Thank you, Sabine, for this opportunity. Having worked with thousands of clients globally, there really have been some patterns that you see that are reoccurring all the time. And a lot of that is really based down to education. And so thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to educate people out there in maybe a better way, a healthier way, to living life and to having an experience that is more fulfilling. And so thank you very much for this opportunity. Sugar is very close to my heart. It has been for a very long time. And really understanding what sugar is about is going to go a long way to educating people out there so that they can help their children, so they can make better choices for themselves. They'll have more energy and really lead a life that is fulfilled and energetic and free from this mental fog that we experience so much of the time.
Wow.
So thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you so much. And this introduction was already super interesting also for our audience, because as what you said, the impact that this whole sugar awareness has is actually, it goes way beyond just the individual. So I love that you address that also with the families and really addressing the importance of reducing your sugar intake. And you mentioned also something about that, it's being close to your heart as well, sugar. Do you have any personal experience with sugar and the impact on your personal health?
That's an excellent question, Sabine, and I thank you very much for bringing it up. My personal experience with sugar has been a long, hard, arduous journey in my life. And it really begins at the foundational basis of how we are brought up in life. When we look at children, how are we rewarding children? And so sugar has been this lifelong, almost like a best friend of mine. And so whenever I did something of achievements, or I did something well when I was younger, I was always rewarded with sugar. And so if I finished a book, I got sugar. If I did my homework or my chores on time or all of that, I was rewarded with sugar. Or I got pocket money and I went out and I bought sugar, chocolates and all of that. And when we begin to understand what the consequences of that is, we're finding out more and more research every single day. We're finding out, we're only beginning to peep through the keyhole of what our bodies are really capable of doing. And when that information comes out, there seems to be what we call this lag time before that information actually makes it down to the public, where the public has access to that information, but also when the procedures and the policies and everything starts to change around that, the lag time is so long that sometimes the upkeep becomes a lot more challenging to deal with. And so it really goes down to education. And so the more we can really give this research, give this knowledge out to the average person that doesn't really have access to that information, or doesn't really even have an interest in it, let's be honest. No one really wants to, oh my God, science, oh my God, nutrition and digestion, So people aren't really aware, and they don't have an interest in that area of research. And so it just becomes habitual to them until they understand the impacts that it's starting to have.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually, thank you so much for sharing it. And it's very interesting. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that also, that, you know, sugar has been their best friend because it was always their reward whenever they did something. They were like a good boy or a good girl. At your birthday party, you get sugar. And that's why, yes, what you said, a lot of people either don't get information about the real truth about sugar when you eat it in, you know, really high quantities, as we do nowadays because of all the hidden sugars. Or as what you said, most people are also like, don't take away my treat. This is like, you know, not what I live for, but, you know, it's like, it is almost identical to thinking this is when I've been good. So that's very challenging.
Well, that's the whole thing, Sabine. And so what basically happened is because of my addiction to sugar as a young child, what happened was certain brain functions changed in the body. And so as I grew up, I had these huge swings in moods. I was carried around a little pill box because to help me cope or deal with the environmental experiences that I was having, because I would have these huge ups and huge downs, then suffer from mental fog and, you know, those mood swings and behaviors with a child that is only coming into the emotional learning and understanding of the progression within one's life. Added to that with the sugar highs and lows, became this very reactive response, the irritability, the mood swings. And so I was diagnosed with depression. And I was basically carrying around a little pill box every single day to make sure that I could take as a 14 and 15-year-old child, making sure that my brain could function in accordance with how and the stresses that I was dealing with in the environment. And so when I got kind of interested in integrative medicine and kind of this culminated in my life to a near-death experience. You know, and following that, I really took my life into my own hands and started to do the research and started to have a look at why I was experiencing that, why I had to be dosed with this medication. And so it's really been a long passion and a long history of mine to find out what is our potential firstly. What are we really capable of achieving? Because we have this beautiful body that is able to regenerate itself. It's innately designed as a self-regulatory and self-healing transformative system. And you know, that's very evident. You cut your finger and your body bleeds. You don't say, okay, finger bleed, okay, stop bleeding, okay, now close, scab, heal. It does that autonomously. And so why was it not doing what it was designed to do? And so it really began this kind of lifelong search of what is our maximum potential that we can actually reach with a healthy body, with a healthy nutrition plan, with understanding what really is going on biochemically, but also from a consciousness perspective. What influence do our emotions have? What influence does the stress have on the body? What hormones do those basically start excreting? And so to really understand sugar, I think it's really important to understand our three brains. And now not many people out there know this. There's been so much focus in recent history with the brain that's in our head. And then as we develop a little further, you know, human beings are so funny. They think they know it all and we know everything about the body, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we found something new. And so there's been this intense focus on the brain in our head. And with recent developments, lately it's kind of the focus has gone into more heart-based living. And so we've got a lot of information and a lot of research coming out from heart math and the neuron connections within the heart and the tissues and the muscles of the heart. Well, recently there's been another big, huge surge in research, and that's to our actual gut brain. And so now we have three. We've got the brain that sits in our head, that's responsible for the processes and making sure things are actioned. We've got the heart brain, which is really centered around the holographic perspective of information contained within the whole body-mind complex. And then we've got our third brain, which is now the gut brain, which is possibly the most interesting research that's come out to date, simply because it's got more neurological connections than the heart brain and the brain that sits in your head.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so this incredible gut brain actually informs the brain in your head on what to regulate. And so through that connection through the vagal nerve and through what we call the microbiome of the stomach, that communication system is responsible for hormones, for our immune response, for how we think and how we feel. And so it's a huge, that's what's so funny, is that belief system of you are what you eat is actually very true in this case. And so we need to really understand how that is impacting our health, because if we are what we eat, what happens when we eat things and go out of balance within the body? Because that's going to influence our immune response, our hormonal response, as well as our neurological response in terms of our behavior and how we basically wired. And so to really understand the impact that sugar is having in the body, we've got to look at those three parallels.
Well, thank you so much for it. I mean, also especially, it is great that you mentioned you are what you eat, and I'm sure our audience has heard it many times before, but now you have just actually broken that down and really explained why is that, why am I what I eat?
Exactly. And digestion doesn't only begin in the stomach, it starts in the mouth. And so you've got a microbiome of your mouth. And so as you chew, as that food breaks down, so that microbiome communicates with what's in the stomach and processes down. So the communication really starts mouth in, straight through. And so it's important to really look at what is happening in the gut and how is that informing our brain to what we're eating. Because sugar gets a bad rap. Let's be honest. It gets a really bad rap. Unfortunately, that bad rap has really, people have become so, there's a reactive side to it, where we tend to push away. It's kind of like in the old days where they said, oh, bacteria is not good, everything's got to be antibacterial. And that's possibly the worst thing we could have done, because our immune system can't learn as we go through, and there's obviously a lot of good bacteria as well. And so we went all of this, and so we started seeing elevated viruses coming into the system because our immune system couldn't be educated in the normal way that it was used to, because everything was so clean. We didn't come into contact with the good bacteria that helped us to digest things in the first place. And so as information comes out, so we start looking at things very more holistically, meaning not holistically as in a whole, but holistically as in the whole coming together. And so when we look at it from that aspect, we're actually living in a very, probably the best time in the world right now. It's the safest we've ever been in the world. It's the most healthiest we've ever been in the world. When we look at the whole, the way that we're moving in terms of progression, we're actually in the best place that we possibly could be. And so as this information comes out, so we start getting healthier, so we start living longer, and so these things start developing. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and I love how you really address the holistic perspective on health in general. That's actually very interesting. And so from a professional point of view, because now we've heard already your personal story, have you seen more about the impact of sugar on your clients' health that you've mentored and coached?
Absolutely. And so thousands of people have this challenge. And we have to look at, once again, those multi-layers and levels when looking in the body. So what does sugar really do? Firstly, sugar gets a bad rap, we know that, but it's necessary. It's part of the fundamental substances that the body needs in order to produce energy. Okay, and so we got to look at what sugar is. And so if it's necessary, where do we get those sugars? And so carbohydrates are one. Okay, and so we can get those carbohydrates and natural sugars within fruits, within potatoes, and it's a very, very necessary side of our digestion, our diet, and our nutrition. The biggest challenge lies is the refined or processed carbohydrates. And so our body doesn't have the ability to break those down. And so that's part of where we look at the gut digestion. And so what we call mutualists or micromutualists with the microbiome. So the gut brain is made up of the microbiome as well as the vagus nerve communication. And so what happens is when we eat those, we've got these natural bacteria, healthy bacteria that sit in the mucosal layer of the body within the small intestine. And so they help to break down the nutrients that our body is not readily available to break down. So we need bacteria there, which are foreign bacteria, but they're mutualists. They don't cause us any harm, and they help break down the stuff that we can't. And therefore all of that gets fed through into what we call the epithelial layer, which are these very tight junctions within on the outside layer, and they're responsible for the protective layer, making sure that these bad bacteria that come in from the toxins on our food or anything like that are able to be removed before penetrating into the internal layer of our body, causing us harm, like the pathogens or your viruses or just the toxins that get through. That communication system is then communicated through the vagal nerve and influences our brain response and behavior. It also communicates with the endocrine, which is the biggest network within the gut, and what that does is affects our moods with our hormones and also it's the immune cells respond to if there's any pathogens, on how to respond if there's invasion within the body.
Wow.
So
it's very complex, our body.
exactly. And so, but what happens when we eat sugar, especially those refined sugars? So in the processing or the refining of those complex carbohydrates, there's a lot of added sugar, and this is where the challenge comes in, because added sugar and sugar in its unnatural form basically causes dehydration in the body, and it influences our blood sugar levels. And so the minute you eat it, your blood sugar level spikes. It goes through the roof, which means insulin is secreted like Mount Everest through clouds. It just goes absolutely crazy. And so your body goes almost into what we call a fight-flight response. And so what does that mean? That means that there's a problem here. And so how does the body let the immune system know that there's a problem? Well, it starts to dehydrate, and we go into this fight-flight response. And so what happens is the amygdala gets hijacked in the brain. And so we go into this fight-flight response where all the parasympathetic nervous system turns off, which means that there's no energy for digestion. It all goes to fight and flight response, which is to the arms and to the legs to run away, or to go into a protection mode. And so the amygdala in the brain turns on, and so we get into this defensive mode. We get irritable, we get edgy, and then what happens later? It crashes. And so then we get tired, and then we get brain fog, okay? When we get irritable, all of that stuff. And so if you think about the average diet, especially maybe here or for the listeners, you know, most people will wake up in the morning and on the way to work they'll get a bagel, or they'll get a gipfeli, or they'll have something, and that's processed refined sugar. And so what happens is your blood sugar spikes, you get dehydrated, you get this huge energy pushed through the body, you go on high alert. Then what happens is it crashes, so you become irritable because now you're starving because your body hasn't actually had any nutrition. And you get irritable, you get defensive, you get moody. And so there's this huge constant, and it does this all day, every day. So the metabolism starts to adjust. What happens in the body is that then causes inflammation. Now, inflammation in the body is like a big red flag to the immune system. The immune system is just like, we've got a problem, guys. And so what happens is it starts to get this inflammation. And so when it inflames, what happens is those on the epithelial layer of the gut, the protective layer to stop all the pathogens from keeping all of them outside, they start to open up. And all the bacteria that's sitting in the mucosa level that's helping to break down the sugar so the nutrients can fall through into absorption actually start getting absorbed and making their way into the body and causing invasion. And now what happens is that invasion, there's more of an immune response, so then there's more inflammation. And then what happens is the immune cells carry that inflammation through the body, and so you start to get inflammation everywhere. And so the body actually starts to go on attack of itself. And it starts to almost eat itself. And because there's no the brain's been hijacked, we're in a fight-flight mode, we up and down all the time, we're crashing, we're in a survival response, all that nourishment, the relaxation of the parasympathetic nervous system is turned off, we can't come out of it. And so when we do this continuously all day, our body can't actually absorb anything. Can't absorb water, can't absorb nutrition, can't absorb anything because it's so dehydrated and the blood sugar levels have spiked all the time. It thinks it's in a survival mode.
Wow.
And so that has a huge effect on our mental health, which is why we're seeing such a spike in depression, why we're seeing such a spike in anxiety, why we're seeing such a spike in the adrenal fatigue within our society. And all of that is because we are overdosing ourselves on sugar every single day. And we don't even know it because it's all added sugar in your pastas, in your, wherever it is, in your sweets. It's all complex sugars that are completely added and refined, and it's having a huge impact on our mental health. And as you know, our mental health affects on how we relate to each other in society, how competent we are at work. Are we able to feel fulfilled and have emotions of joy and happiness and serotonin? And so the body sees this as a reward system, and so we feel good, but then it starts the anticipation. And so soon we don't feel good because we got the reward. Soon it's literally we feel good leading up to the reward. And so it becomes this addiction, this addictive behavior, which defines addiction really. It's the dopamine level spike in the reward, but it's in the getting the reward, not in the reward itself. And so our body becomes addicted to when is going to be my next
dose.
My next hit. Yeah. Absolutely. And because the brain has become hijacked, it's activated the reptilian brain, which doesn't know right and wrong, doesn't know good and bad. It just knows react. And so emotionally, there's no serotonin because now that the parasympathetic nervous system has been blocked off, so the body can't release serotonin. And so it's dopamine, it's this reward, but with no happiness and no joy. And so we've got to really look at the fundamental part of how we can make this change, not only for ourselves as adults, but what information are we giving to our children? How are we basically programming them from that young age to be set up for a dopamine spike that's going to only enhance their addictive behaviors? And now we've got another challenge. The addictive behaviors have turned into cell phones and dopamine likes on Facebook and Instagram and all of that. And so that brain function also then drives that addiction into another area. And so we've got multiple prongs where we need to really educate the population and the people and our clients and our friends and our families onto the risks. So sugar risks include a high amount of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all of these things that could be changed with one simple switch. Just the awareness around what kind of sugar am I eating.
That's very powerful, and I love that you addressed that. And I mean, thank you so much for this incredible explanation again, and especially since it's very, very complex. Our body is just incredible. And I love it that you also explained to our audience the difference between, the refined sugars and then the sugars that we can actually have, because a lot of people get confused because they think, but we always learn our cells need glucose, so they get confused. But why can't I eat my white sugars then? Because we always hear that our brain needs a sugar. So thank you so much for also explaining the difference, what happens between when we eat actually the proper sugars, like the natural occurring sugars in fruit or in like starches, like carrots or potatoes, and then the actually kind of hidden, sneakily added sugars in all of our food, and that we're just consuming in quantities that our body can't deal with it, is what you just explained. Thank you so much for sharing it. What about for our audience? Are there one or two tips, practical tips, that they could start integrating today in their life to reduce their sugar intake?
Okay. Yes, you can. So definitely be aware of the ingredients that are in food. Now, for me, I keep it simple. If it doesn't say carrot or apple or an ingredient that I don't understand, then I probably shouldn't be putting it into my body. And so even today, when we go to the co-op or to the Migros or to our supermarket or our local, wherever we're going, you can even buy these salads that are pre-packaged. And you buy your Caesar salad or you buy whatever. If you actually turn around, those salads have sugar in them. And so the biggest tip that I can put out there is make your own food, which is really buying a tomato that doesn't need an ingredient stamp on it telling you what's in the tomato. Okay, stay organic, stay something that's been bio-grown in terms of its process, and cut all the processed sugars out. Really cut back on the chocolate, the sugary sweets, the processed and refined, the breads, all of that is really going to help and go a long way to stopping that inflammation. Because what basically happens is all of those diseases that invade the body get carried elsewhere within the body, and so we get an imbalance within the microbiome. So the mutualists that should be there, like Candida we have in our body, it's normal, it's part of the process. But when we get that inflammatory process, those species go out of balance. And so they almost like, if you think about a garden, the garden gets overgrown with weeds, and so they become an invasory process within the body. Not because they shouldn't be there, but because they're just out of balance. And so when our bodies start to come back into balance, the self-regulatory system can then better harness itself, and mood elevates, we start feeling better, we've got more energy. But to start off with, it's not going to be the most pleasant process. Okay, why? Because your body's going to have a response. Because the cells have been dehydrated for such a long time. When we come into balance, it's almost like cleaning a drain. And so we might lack even less energy to start off with. And so these are very good areas to highlight, because there will be a detox process that you go through. So also be very aware and follow a good program. Don't just kind of cut it and just think everything's going to be okay. You need certain other nutrients because your body is going to go through a detox. And so also inform your partners, because you could get a little bit more moody as you go along. And so make sure that both of you go through the same process too. It's also a nice supportive role, and really, really good. But once you're through that breakdown part and you break through that experience, you will start and begin to notice how much of an impact that this had on your life, and also what control it had of you. Sugar was really controlling you because it hijacks the brain. You're not in control. And so, it's the clarity, the focus, the efficiency and productivity that you get through within your life just elevates. And so I really, just start cutting it down, is the best tip that I can give.
Thank you so much. That is super interesting, and I love it also how you mentioned the support. That is so important, to have the support with your colleagues, your family, because you're sharing the joy and the downs. It's like when you get moody, but that will be super helpful. Really, it's incredible to everything you've shared with our audience. I'm sure that they have had a lot of aha moments, like, oh, that is why it's so difficult. Once you understand what is actually happening and how your brain gets hijacked, you can also kind of start to relax a little. So it's not your fault that you're completely, hooked on sugar, and that there's actually a way to get out of it. And once you're there, is what you mentioned, you actually won't look back anymore, because once you feel so much better, you're really like, oh, why did I even feel that crap before? So we're super excited for you to take away also Justin's lessons.
Yes.
How can people get in contact with you and learn more about your LifePrint system?
So the usual method is online. So you can go to www.j2squared.com. And that will really give you access to a little bit about me, my story, and what's going on in the world of Justin.
Perfect, perfect. We'll put it down here, the website for you, so you can check it out. Justin, from the bottom of my heart and also from our audience, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for having me, everybody. And I hope you've enjoyed this time with us and learned something new. And just to recap, those top tips are: number 1, make your own food. Number 2, try and buy organically or bio-farmed food, making sure that nothing's been added, no genetically modified foods, and make sure that you are getting the proper nutrition. Number 3, if you don't understand what's on the label, then you probably shouldn't be eating it. And then number 4, partner up with somebody and have a support system and follow a proper program that has been recommended and has the proper nutritional and the proper vitamin supplement program that will help you benefit from it.
Great, super. Thank you so much,
Pleasure,
Justin.
Sabine.
It's been a pleasure for us too. Thank
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.